Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, B2B Marketing Bliss, Intent Data Meets Predictive Scoring. I'm Sal Lasoro, publisher at Demand Gen Report, and I'll be your moderator for this presentation. And a spoiler alert, it's going to be a great session. It's filled with interesting insights from an industry leader and a hot topic and real-world examples. We welcome all attendees to follow along and share your thoughts and feedback on Twitter and LinkedIn using the hashtag CO Series. As you can see, all of our Twitter handles are right here on the screen, and we look forward to connecting you all on social. To make life just a little easier for you, you can tweet directly from the On24 platform here using the Twitter widget on your screen. Also, if you haven't done so already, please join more than 65,000 of your peers and subscribe today to our weekly newsletter at demandgenreport.com. For today's webinar, obviously, we are using the On24 platform. During the presentation, you can access all the information you need from the toolbar. As I mentioned earlier, you can tweet directly within the platform using the Twitter widget on the left-hand side of the screen. We also encourage you to ask our presenter questions as they come to mind. To do so, just simply click on the Q&A widget at the top right corner of the screen. Today's presentation is slated to run about 25 to 35 minutes with 10 minutes set aside for Q&A. Following the session, remember you can submit questions using the Q&A widget at any time, so please don't wait till the end. We'll try to get to as many of those as possible. Of course, this session is being recorded, and all attendees will receive an archive link to the presentation. You can go back, review it, and share it with your colleagues, your friends, your family, whatever you'd like to do. We also welcome you to let us know how we're doing so we can continue to improve the level of value we provide you. So please stay on to take our quick survey that will automatically launch once this webinar session ends. If you're like me and you just can't wait, and you can pull up and complete the survey at any time during the webinar by clicking on the survey icon circled here at the bottom of your screen. And again, before signing off, please take a minute to complete the survey. Alrighty, now I'm pleased to introduce our featured speaker, Peter Murphy. In his role as Global VP of Platform Sales, Peter is responsible for driving client adoption, solution value, and pipeline revenue for MRP Prelytics, the only enterprise-class predictive ABM platform. He's their hallmark advocate of this uniquely powerful solution. He's usually found in pre-sales or customer success conversation with the world's most progressive brands and their sales and marketing teams. Guiding them to revenue performance, he helps to code their ABM programs into AI and data-driven orchestrations, spanning more than half a dozen channels, 100 countries, and 20 languages. Peter brings MRP more than 20 years of technology sales and marketing leadership and a keen focus on helping clients identify the connection of their needs to high-value solutions. Prior to MRP, Peter was a VP of Sales at Oracle's Retail Global Business Unit and held leadership roles at Micros, where he helped drive market impact from their earliest days to achieving the largest market share for his served market, which was specialty retail. His career development began as a technology consultant at a division of Infor in the UK prior to moving to the US. He holds a bachelor's degree of commerce from the University of College Cork in Ireland, and he loves to run, bike, camp, and coach youth soccer. So it's safe to say we are all in good hands today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this over to Peter to kick off the presentation. Welcome, Peter.
Well, thank you very much, Sal, and thank you for the opportunity to connect today. A key driver, actually, in the desire to connect with you all in this session was actually because of a follow-up to the findings that Demand Gen Report highlighted, I think, at the end of last year. And the report, if you recall, was behind the intent data curtain, how best-in-class B2B brands are driving success with predictive ABM. So apart from the catchy name, which caught my attention, one of the findings that I found interesting was that 1/3 of the account-based marketing practitioners, known in our industry, of course, as ABM practitioners, plan to use intent data. I think the number was 36%, and predictive analytics, you mentioned, was 35% to better their accounting targeting efforts. So two things struck me from that report. Firstly, what are the other 2/3 of ABM practitioners doing to better their account targeting efforts? And two, why is there still this debate about intent providers versus predictive engine providers? So the answer to the first question was partly answered, I think, later in the report that you pointed out that 80% of companies are still heavily relying on sales to build their target audiences. And that made a lot of sense to me, having spent a large part of my career, as you just mentioned, in sales and sales management, where QBRs, annual reviews, key account assessments, TAS plans, they all formed part of the sales input in that ongoing interaction between sales and marketing. And I think that will continue. We're not going to replace that. But if only a third of us who are claiming to be ABM practitioners are using intent or predictive or planning to do that, I think collectively there's something that's just not quite working efficiently yet, or we're not as mature as we thought we were at this stage. So I think there's some time to pay attention to that, and we'll bring up a couple of those topics throughout. To the second part of the question that I had from your report as to why there's still this debate about intent versus predictive scoring, this is kind of the key nature of what we're going to cover today. So the market, I think, has elevated a decision. Is it best to use intent data or predictive analytics? Or more confounded and off base is perhaps the inference said by many that intent data is predictive. So I'm here to say that I think it's a false choice. Further, I would go as far to say that those who argue the contrary are simply trying to sell a platform or maybe not providing best practices. So intent data is not predictive, and predictive is not relevance, right? So relevance, it is relevant, but it's not relevance. Marketers need to understand the role of each. And I think the magic or the bliss that occurs when you can do both will occur. The fact that intent data isn't predictive, it's backward looking. It poses significant latency, a marketing trigger. It involves a lot more than a subscription with a single vendor. Intent certainly can help identify accounts, but it's very one-dimensional. What does that look like if you're an ABM marketing based upon intent data? I think I'm going to tell you that you're going to be the person that's often late to the party. You're the spoiler in a negotiating table of your competitor, which may be something you want. But really, when you look at intent data, it's something that swells up over time. So your intent provider may be pointing this out to you late in the game, or you just don't have enough signals captured early enough to let you know in time, or you might be just getting too much noise and too many false positives. Now, contrasting that with predictive analytics, it's got a conundrum there too. We can't offer you a direction to be relevant with your audience. So some people are confusing intent with predictive today. They're thinking that a higher score of relevance in a topic means that they're in market, and therefore that there's a relevance in taking an action. And what we are here to do in this session, and that is not a good assumption, to assume that intent is predictive or predictive is intent. And when marketing understands that, and the whole idea of ABM can be about simplifying the complexities of these, some large organizations with multiple product lines, and multiple reasons to talk about overlapping audiences all the time, there's also real need to scale ABM and simplify the complexity in which you operate. So the irony of this misnomer is that marketers can't define relevance. Now, we can construct and send campaigns, but we can't tell someone what they're interested in. And we can't always control how audiences are going to respond to us. So this one point goes a long way to indicate why ABM can start to get wildly complex in larger organizations. You have competing interests because you have overlapping audiences. So what if you're using intent and not using predictive? What are we missing out on? And these, I think, are some examples of some critical inputs that can score and determine if a company is in market for your product. Now, remember, the role of predictive analytics is looking at various other sources of data. Some of these characteristics are captured in account plans within sales organizations. They could come from companies that are able to profile a financial risk analysis on whether the client is actually good at paying vendors, or understanding what the influence centers are around topics in different geographies around the world. And as you can see here in this list, I've included various propensity results. Are they likely to be in market? Will they respond to messages? Have they previously responded to messages? Where is the buying center influencing this decision? Does the sales team have the right access to the right authority? And, have we looked at our CRMs, and have we previously discovered that we've been previously trying to sell them and repeatedly lost them? I mean, these are all elements that would figure into a predictive model. So on the corollary side of that equation, of course, we're also saying that the predictive analytics without understanding the topic of interest is also not very usable. So let's take a little deeper look about what composes intent. Now, some people think that it includes the purchase of a common list of topics, that it is available to many others too. It's something that you can put in a shopping cart, if you will. That incidentally, the same list of those prospective clients that are being provided go to your competitors. And it seems to be like that is the entry level point for ABM for some folks, while others are having to look at building out and organizing appropriate topics from specific optimized keyword structures. So it gets into a bit more of an advanced feature set. And then others are looking to how intent impacts across multiple geographies, multiple languages, and all of that is available in the marketplace from various sources. But let's look again at the nature of data and the detail of the data. Okay, so the nature and the nurture, if you will. So in simple terms, the nature of the data, if we were to build this 2x2, could be implied or it could be explicit. So implied nature of the data would be things where things are inferred. And the detail of the data on the x-axis is really just broken across into company level information and people level or person or individual level information. To the extent that I referenced, what we would describe as company implied level intent, I think that fits in the lower left quadrant. And generally speaking, there's other ways that we want to fill this box up. But when we look at the role of sales management, the sales management team is always looking for explicit company level information, right? So that's the kind of the magic of what we would get on the top left. And along the way of that journey in marketing campaigns, you're going to factor in lead generation tactics, such as content syndication, such as direct mail, such as business development activities, even if that is in your department with inside sales. And those things then can help facilitate what would lead to more explicit level information. And that could be in a form of, again, some of those digital tactics continue to be nurtured, where there's particular profiling information and answering of questions, and people are downloading and you're getting that verified intent or verified profile back. It also includes what we would describe as voice verified intent. And then ultimately, as you get to look at what you get to company level explicit intent, you're creating a bigger picture. But in order to do that, you also need predictive analytics along the way. And as you look at the left graph here, what we're seeing is an intent score that has been developed and nurtured, right? So it will build upon implied to get hopefully to explicit information. We'll have campaigns that will help us generate information that will be confirmed from both people level and at a company level. And all of that will factor in to what we would describe as the buyer's journey. So along the way, the intent signals will change, the predictive models will change, and there will be continued that interaction between sales and marketing as you go through that sales pipeline. So now we should stop for a second and then take a look at this slide. And this is where I think we're at in the industry today. And to a certain extent, if you look at those 3 columns, the first 2 is where we see most of the activity. And I don't think it's a very pretty picture, actually. So for marketing organizations, it has looked like this on the left for some time. You know, this could be an example where somebody's running a display platform or a content syndication program. And as we look to phase 2, where we're trying to build in some efficiencies by using ABM, what you still see is a lot of back and forth and a lot of interaction that's happening. And so the issue here is that we've created an ABM structure that is really complex, and it's gotten there really quite quickly, where we've spent a lot of marketing dollars and in many cases a lot of resources on data science, and a lot of effort being spent actioning. It's basically just more media spend on all of these targeted list of clients. So the challenge is not about sending them the next message, because we're sending them an endless list of messages. I think the challenge is understanding when they need that next message. So how do you know if and when they need a message? Well, that goes back to the previous image, if you recall, that had the 3 dimensions. And those things must intersect, where we identify the intent and the propensity, where we see that next intent and see interests in a topic that is highly relevant to them, and where there's a predictive score that can indicate simultaneously that there's a likelihood that they're going to act on something at that point of the buyer journey. So this slide is showing something that is not working the way it should, but as we move to the right, I think there's an opportunity for us to essentially simplify. We simplify the methodology, we'll get much more value out of the ABM programs. So the process of relevance. I think the key takeaway for me here is that we should let the audiences tell us what they are interested in, and let the numbers show us what they are most interested in hearing. And if we can do that, and if we have what I would describe as patience, and do more precision or select marketing by being disciplined and letting the audiences define that, we're going to see some tremendous results. So on the bad news, good news here, right? What we're seeing is that, you know, personalization is causing a very strong challenge in the ABM space, right? So we've got, on average, large enterprises are having upwards of 6 personalization tools. So typically, that is 6 different messages for someone who might be receiving along a similar part of the buyer journey. And the messages may not be similar because they're coming from some different sources. And we can tell, obviously, that the dissatisfaction rate when we do that is very high. Now, if you work on the multi-channel program model that reflects the audience needs and delivered in that omni-channel ABM strategy, you see a much higher result. You know, a 19% versus a 5.4%. Organizing it through that multi-channel, omni-channel delivery mechanism will yield, again, a simplification of the methodology with higher rewards and more impact. So let's go back to data for a minute. You know, we talked about the simplification of the methodology. So I'm going to admit here, and maybe this is no surprise to anybody who has to deal with data on a day-to-day basis, but I haven't seen the complexity of data getting any easier, right? If anything, I think it's getting more complex. You know, we speak about Moore's Law from those of us that study that in college, and the doubling of information every couple of years is going to continue for some time. And I think all of that means is that as different sources are coming into the fray of marketing, it's just going to be a bigger task for us to manage the complex data stream. We have data that's unintelligible, it's disconnected, there's lots of silos. That isn't going away. So I think, this was something that Demand Gen report actually covered a couple of years ago. It was under a different program, but the name of that, I think, was Biggest Challenges of Maintaining Data Quality. And, I think some of those themes are definitely still there, that spoke to the resources. It spoke to the lack of integration to the CRM systems and the disconnections and the data. So I think a good ABM platform can help connect the dots. Look at predictive. I think predictive analytics gives you a time to score well. And in some case, you're going to find that these predictive solutions are black boxes. There may be a very strong data science element to it, but you probably don't know what model is being used over what empirical data that they came up with for that prediction. And that may be okay initially. It might be okay in certain situations that need help getting off the ground with a predictive modeling solution. But for others, we're starting to see that that's really not quite good enough, as they're looking to get explanations as to how the modelings work. So our belief is that we need to give people the ability to open up the black box and an indication as to show how it works, basically how we're ingesting the data and what models from other good data sets that could be outside the core to find correlations of other things that are being captured. So, prediction isn't an abstract idea. It isn't a black box, as I mentioned. The scoring should have a good source of data. It needs to have a good target in which to build a propensity model. And those propensities are various, right? It could be about, the propensity to buy your product, the propensity to respond to an email campaign, the propensity to respond to a sales meeting. I wish, having already responded to a sales campaign, right? So you get these, joined statements that you're trying to build up on your propensity model to provide the framework for the next best action. And those are the things that the predictive analytics can provide. So if you're working with a provider that can show you how their engine works and importantly, have an ability to adapt that business model, you're on the right path. So before we get to some conclusions and look at a couple of case studies, I just want to reference a little bit about MRP. We do believe that we're a different ABM platform provider. For one thing, we're globally based. We've got 11 different offices, nearly 700 employees. We're part of a public company. So we've got an incredible technology that is the fastest time series technology that has been benchmarked in the world today. And our focus is clearly on delivering solutions. And a lot of the case studies that we could go through don't involve just technology, right? They involve people and services, bringing it all together. And for us, it is about simplifying the complex. We spoke about the data, and we spoke about the insights that you get from predictive. But I think there's also that key area about what happens when you have both predictive and intent or data working well together. The real important stream is taking that result and putting it into action quickly. And you'll need to find that from your provider, in which how fast can they act on the data, how fast can they run campaigns based upon things that are happening in real time and working with the sales teams. So now let's look at some case studies. Examples here of different companies that combined intent and predictive to drive results. The first one is a global network technology company. They had some post-funnel ABM objectives, and part of this was around retaining existing clients, renewing subscriptions on those clients, finding cross-sells and upsells, as well as finding means to re-engage some of their clients that had just gone a little quiet. So they wanted to understand targeted account pain points and serve them relevant messages across multiple channels. They wanted to understand target account readiness to purchase and engage them through the right marketing channels. And then also understanding those topics and the timings of the buyer journey stage. The way we approached it was, to what we had spoken earlier, was tying their intent data with the predictive information and the predictive models. And adding a layer of complexity here actually is that, they were doing this through their channel partner program, right? So it wasn't just a direct selling model. So for the program, they found that intent data was key. Off-the-shelf intent was too generic for them. So we helped them curate and optimize particular topics and keywords that really fine-tune the results, including competitive product lines in their space. So it would include, particular references to key products that they were competing against. And what we found as we built out our predictive models based upon previous successes that they had, we found that the competitive intelligence available before it became a lead helped them predict that companies researching, in this example, competitor number 2, were 3 times as likely to become a lead as those that did not show intent around competitor number 2. So from there, what they were to do is to do some lookalike modeling of finding other accounts now from those intent signals, to target those accounts that they felt more confident in focusing on, right? Because they were honing in on competitor number 2. Again, with the benefit of the predictive intelligence that was marketing and how they could retarget with a competitive takeout. So data definitely was the key to simplifying the complexity. We had another case that's not covered here, but we had another example that did a very similar thing in terms of the process. And what we found from their re-engagement process was that by doing the same activities as we were doing here, they were able to expedite the closing of sale from opportunity found to closing of sale by 45 days and 53 days in 2 different lines of business. And that was, when you're talking about a sales cycle that is 7-8 months, is a significant improvement in your sales cycle. And finally, as we looked at this case example, intent data won't tell you how far down the funnel an account has progressed, right? So they needed to identify the timing, the buyer's journey stages, and channels to reach those accounts. The predictive needed that data marketing and sales engagement data was doing. So we're talking about tracking each open to click, each meeting, each lead generation, as well as that customized intent layer I was mentioning, all the way through the buyer journey, so that they could reassemble a data-driven view of each stage of their pipeline. And I think that speaks very much to the interaction between sales and marketing, where marketing's job continues beyond the traditional handoff from MQL to SAL, right? And they're taking part throughout the pipeline. The second case study we will cover here, this is an enterprise software client that we have. Again, we're talking about intent to predictive, and the goal was to produce a unified account view to improve interactions between marketing and sales, to help cross-sell legacy clients of theirs to their cloud offerings, to upsell new solutions that they had acquired via other acquisitions, and all of that was targeting, C-level buying teams. So they applied intent data and predictive analytics to identify the needs and timing for each target accounts. They were creating more effective interactions between the marketing and sales, very similar to the previous example. And then they were, in this case, they were leveraging machine learning to make increasingly better predictions, right? So we took a very ABM approach to this. Again, we were nurturing topics. Those would change on a relatively common basis. It wasn't a one and done approach. So that's the other thing about intent, is that as you look at your programs, you're going to have to continue to change what might be your intent criteria. And we would combine that again with the predictive machine learning, as well as the engagement data, applying all of that to the same time series view that you see on the right here, right? So you have a very interesting view of the world where you can attribute your success of your campaigns as things are working through the funnel. And all of this view, by the way, is available to both sales and marketing, both at leadership and at the user level. So what has marketing done for me lately? The sales users can actually see this in the system. And all of that is basically taking that underlying data for the marketing teams to create these targeted audiences. So, marketing and machine learning can only get you so far. You still need to take the action. And that action is at the speed of the customer engagement. We're creating more efficient interactions between the marketing and sales teams. And see here again, it's working our way down the funnel. We looked at the marketing machine learning algorithms, and we found that they were able to predict the journeys of the sales funnel incredibly well. And from that, they were able to make better predictions and shorten the sales cycle. So in conclusion, I would encourage you to market with your audience. You're using intent data and predictive analytics. If you do that, you're going to quicken the right outcomes. I would encourage you to open up the black box. I would encourage you to simplify. And if you simplify the methodology, you will get better results. So.
Thank you very much. Well, again, Peter, great presentation. I think one of the main takeaways I took was the straightforward the messaging of marketing with your audience, not at your audience. I think, again, a lot of times marketers feel the need to sort of force their messaging to their audience instead of taking the signs from their audience as to what they want to hear. So great job there. So we have received many great questions. We're going to get to those, but I just want to remind everyone to make sure you do take the survey right after the session ends, or if you wanted to pull it up via the survey icon, you can do that. We do take the information to heart, and we use that to as we produce our next webinar series. And also just to let everyone know that we do try to get as many questions as we can live, but unfortunately we don't have time for all of them, but we will follow up the answers via email. So without further ado, let's get to those questions. All right, Peter, so the first one came in from Kathy. She's asking, if I can only afford intent or predictor for a proof of concept, which provides the greatest ROI?
I think it's a tricky question because if the theme of our discussion was really about both, intent is not predictive and predictive doesn't offer relevance. But if it was forced on you, I think if you were to run a proof of concept using one or the other, the chances are you would get a lift in outcomes. But I just don't think you're going to get the full experience of it. And I think you just need to take a look at the ABM platform providers and really make sure that they have both in their portfolio if you're going to embark upon any kind of proof of concept.
That makes sense. I appreciate you standing behind your guns there. So, the next one comes from Jeannie. She's asking, do I need different predictive models to determine the buying stage, the next best action, lookalike scoring, etc.? I'm basically asking, is machine learning a prerequisite for predictive? Actually, I think there's two questions that are happening here. So to the first point, I think absolutely. I don't think there's any single model that can serve all of the marketing needs. Many of the people we've chatted to, they still don't know what their model is predicting in certain cases. But based upon your marketing goals, I do think you're going to have potentially many predictive models that will happen, and they'll change over time. And they'll come from different sources. They could come from, the models that we would provide, for example. They could come from your data science teams. They can come from that they build or the data science team source from open source modeling tools that are out there. So there's definitely multiple facets to that. And then in terms of the machine learning being a prerequisite,
I think in the current state of play, it's maturing still. We feel pretty confident in our machine learning toolkit in being able to, as we mentioned, open up the black box and letting the marketers see and interact with those modeling tools. So to that extent, I think there is a lot of predictive that have machine learning, but it's not very agile, it's not very usable, it's not very changeable, and I think those are the things that you need to look for.
Great, that makes sense. All right, I think we have time for one more. This one's from David. He's asking, are there intent data providers and or predictive vendors that work well together or lend themselves to easier mixing of intent with predictive?
Well, I can speak to our own platform in that we are absolutely open to, we're not the commanders and the generators of all the data in the world, right? So I think in our case, we're open to taking sources of intent from other places. And in many cases, it's a good thing, right? You're going to have data that's coming from maybe, relationships from publisher sites that focus on, second-party data. Then there's the third-party streaming that will happen from maybe more public domains on the internet. So all of that can build into your intent stream, and in other cases it'll actually verify where there's overlapping data. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think on the predictive side, again, as we covered in the previous question, it's all about being able to have an ability to take in models that are outside of the platform. So I think the ability to integrate really is the key to the question. And I think finally, I would just add one final comment. I think, we talked a lot about the data intent and the predictive models and really what happens when you have that intersection, right? So being able to action the data and put it together quickly and timely is really, the most important step. And, let that be the weak link in the chain, right? So getting the intersection of the data and passing it into the nurturing systems and all these digital tactics that we talked about, and being able to funnel that back in to your scoring models is really the key.
Great. The holy grail, so to speak.
I hope so, yes.
All right, I think that's all the time we have for questions. I want to thank you again, Peter, for such a great session, and to thank all our attendees for taking the time out to join us today. Please be sure to join us for our next session, which is ABM without the WTF, 8 lessons from top performing brands. That is scheduled for 4 o'clock Eastern today. So thanks again, and have a great day, folks.